This is one of the most important and contentious issues of anything that we have ever talked about. Ever. This is why it makes sense to pardon Derek Chauvin and the truth behind the George Floyd case. Simply put, very, very simple. The jury, the judge should have directed a verdict or ruled a judgment of acquittal in favor of Derek Chauvin because there was reasonable doubt as to his involvement in and his causation in the death of George Floyd, who many people believe, and I believe that within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, indicates that he died because of a drug overdose. The truth behind the George Floyd case, folks, this is it. Let's cut to the noise and cut to the chase and get to the heart of the matter. Derek Chauvin, a former Minneapolis police officer, is rotting in a federal prison for a crime he might not have committed. There is reasonable doubt of that. Remember, reasonable doubt stops the train. The George Floyd case sold to the American public as an open and shut tale of police brutality. It reeks of errors, of inconsistencies, and lynch mob mentality that railroaded a cop doing his job. With conservative folks like Ben Shapiro and Elon Musk now raising the flag for a pardon, as well as others. It's time to ask, did the system get this one wrong? Was Chauvin the scapegoat for a radical left agenda that wanted to burn down law and order? Let's dive into the evidence. And trust me, it's not what the woke crowd wants you to hear. It's not what they want you to believe. It's not anything even remotely similar to what the reality is. Because remember, Mr. Chauvin does not have to prove anything. It is incumbent upon the government to prove beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that he was a direct and proximate cause of the death of Mr. Floyd. Not that there was some intervening factor such as drug overdose and the like. This was a cop caught in the crosshairs. They were determined to make him. There was no way that anybody would have risked another OJ, another LA, another Rodney King, anything like that. Derek Chauvin wasn't some rogue officer looking to make headlines. He was a 19-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department, a guy who'd seen it all, drug busts and gang violence, you name it. On May the 25th, 2020, he responded to a call about some feller passing a counterfeit $20 bill at a convenience store. This is the patron saint of BLM, passing a Fugazi bill. That guy, that person, George Floyd. Now, let's be real. Floyd wasn't exactly a choir boy. He had a rap sheet longer than his CVS receipt. Robbery, drug charges, you get the picture. When Chauvin and his team arrived, they found Floyd high as a kite, resisting arrest and acting erratic. So what's a cop supposed to do? Let him walk? Let him walk away? Let him say, all right, walk this one off, take it easy. Big misunderstanding here. No, they followed protocol. Let me say this again. They followed protocol and they followed what he was trained to do. They restrained him and tried to get him control of a serious and very chaotic situation. But then the cameras rolled and the radical left pounced. A viral video showed Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes. That's the story. And the image was shocking. Nobody's denying that. I'm not denying that. I think that particular procedure should either be reconsidered or not taught. But that's what he was instructed to do. Let me say that again. He was instructed to do that. Taught at the academy, taught by his superiors. Floyd stopped breathing, and the nation erupted. Riots torched cities, defund the police became a battle cry. And as far as Mr. Chauvin, he was painted as the poster child for everything the left hates about law enforcement. And the problem? Well, the narrative didn't match the facts. And those facts, buried under a mountain of outrage, suggest that Floyd's death wasn't Officer Chauvin's fault. It might have been a tragic overdose, plain and simple. Now, the autopsy bombshell that liberals ignore. Always go to the facts. Always go to the forensics. Don't just ask yourself, look at the specifics, whether it's Epstein, whether it's plane crashes or buildings that seem to crumble due to jet fuel. Always ask, what did the facts show? Here's where the rubber meets the road. The autopsy. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's report didn't scream murder by cop. It listed Floyd's cause of death as cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Now, sounds bad, right? Right? But if you dig deeper, Floyd had a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. 11 nanograms per milliliter, folks. Experts say anything over 3 can kill you. He had 11. He also had methamphetamine, a heart condition, and a body ravaged by years of drug abuse. And the report noted no life-threatening injuries to his neck, no crushed windpipe, no broken bones, no crushed windpipe, no hyoid fracture, no thyroid cartilage, as in the Epstein case. Nope, none of that. So what really stopped Floyd's heart? Was it Chauvin's knee or the poison that was coursing through his veins? Now, the defense brought in Dr. David Fowler, a forensic pathologist, who testified that Floyd's death was likely a cardiac arrhythmia triggered by drugs and heart disease, not asphyxiation. Even the county's own examiner, Dr. Andrew Baker, admitted under oath that Floyd's heart issues and drug levels were significant factors. But the jury and the public, they didn't want to hear it. Nope. They were already convinced, and they'd already convicted Chauvin in the court of Twitter before the trial had even started. There was no way this man could have ever gotten a fair shake, ever. Now, the left wanted a villain, and they got one. Never mind the science, never mind the truth. A trial tainted by mob rule. Now, let's talk about that trial, okay? It was a circus. A sham dressed up, don't worry about that. A sham dressed up as justice. Chauvin faced second-degree murder and manslaughter. Charges, now, think about this. Let me go through this again. Pardon me for that. I'm so sorry. Forgive me for that interruption. Mr. Chauvin faced second-degree murder and manslaughter charges in state court. Plus, what about double jeopardy? Well, that's different. Plus federal civil rights violations. That's always how they get you. The deck was stacked from day one. And by the way, the civil rights violations, remember this. This isn't just that somebody died in police custody and that there's this automatic federal court case. No. It was they deprived him of his civil rights. There was some kind of animus involved. There was some type of deliberate anger, hostility, something that was directed to him because of his race, because of his ethnicity. Not that he died. They were asking one time, could O.J. Simpson have been charged with violating Nicole Brown Simpson's civil rights? And the answer was no. There's no evidence that he had any racial animus towards her. No, it's not this automatic. So what was there that in any way indicated that Chauvin picked him out or did anything out of the ordinary because of his race or national origin or creed or religion or gender or what have you? The deck was stacked from day one. Minneapolis was a powder keg. Riots had already cost millions, and the city was desperate to appease the mob. Sound familiar? This is OJ. Remember OJ when they moved the case from Brentwood or wherever it was to L.A.? Remember that? Remember, they changed it to rig it, to jury rig, hence the name. Jurors weren't sequestered properly. They lived in a community plastered with "Justice for George" signs everywhere. One juror even admitted attending a Black Lives Matter rally before the trial. Impartial? Give me a break. Then there's the pressure. Politicians like Maxine Waters, yeah, that Maxine, publicly demanded a guilty verdict, threatening more unrest if Chauvin walked. And the media ran wall-to-wall coverage, painting Floyd as a saint. Remember the pictures of him, the saint with the angels? Remember that? He was a saint. And Chauvin, of course, was a monster. Many people have said there was massive overt pressure on the jury to return a guilty verdict, regardless of the evidence. This wasn't a trial. It was a lynching with legal paperwork. Chauvin's team didn't even get a fair shot to present the drug overdose angle. His own lawyer, Eric Nelson, dropped the ball, many say, by not pushing harder on Floyd's heart condition and fentanyl levels. That, as has been argued, is ineffective assistance of counsel. In Florida, we call that the old 3850 motion, and you always hated that. And it's grounds for an appeal. And in some respects, bar sanctions, or better yet, a pardon. Now, the overdose evidence keeps piling up. Okay, fast forward to 2024. Chauvin's legal team scored a win when a federal judge allowed them to re-examine Floyd's heart tissue and autopsy samples. Now, why is that important? Because a pathologist, Dr. William Schetzel, came forward with a bombshell. Floyd might have died from, ready for this, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, which is a heart condition triggered by stress and drugs, not neck compression. Now, Chauvin claims that Nelson never told him about his theory, robbing him of a chance to test it during the trial. If that's true, it's a miscarriage of justice, plain and simple. And let's not forget the body cam footage. It shows Floyd complaining he couldn't breathe before Chauvin's knee was anywhere near his neck. Let me say this again and listen carefully. He was saying he couldn't breathe before the officer's knee was anywhere near his neck. Now, by the way, as somebody who studies arrest videos as a form of entertainment, everybody today, when they are stopped at a Walmart, at a Costco, pulled over for a taillight being out, will always scream, "I can't breathe." It's something people say today because of this. One of the things which is important is if you can't breathe, you can't talk. And you can't yell for 5 minutes, "I can't breathe," if you can't breathe. They also will say, "I need to speak with your superior," and literally, bruh, but that's another story. Now, he was also, this is going back to Mr. Floyd, he was also foaming at the mouth, which is a classic sign of overdose. Cops deal with this stuff all the time. You know, with Narcan and everything, with naloxone. They know the signs. Yet the prosecution spun it as proof of Chauvin's guilt. And the jury bought it hook, line, and sinker. Why? Because they were determined and they were ready to find him guilty no matter what. And the evidence keeps stacking up. This is important. Floyd's death wasn't murder. It was a tragedy fueled by his own choices. Officer Chauvin was just the guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, why does a pardon make sense? Why pardon him? Because law enforcement deserves better than this. Cops put their lives on the line every single day. They deal with junkies and thugs and chaos most of us cannot even imagine. Officer Chauvin wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a murderer. He followed training. Minneapolis PD policy allowed neck restraints and, in fact, taught them back then And it was part of the protocol. In fact, you could be disciplined if you did not use this. Why? It was a non-lethal means of submission. And they tried to subdue a suspect who wouldn't comply. Shouldn't he have eased up? Should he have eased up? Maybe. But pinning Floyd's death on him ignores the bigger picture. A drug epidemic tearing through our cities, killing more people than police ever will. And President Trump gets this. He's already shown he is pro-cop and pro-law and order. Pardoning officers in tough spots, like those D.C. cops in the Karen Hilton Brown case, a federal pardon for Chauvin's 21-year civil rights sentence wouldn't erase his state conviction. Sure, Trump can't touch Minneapolis' 22-and-a-half-year murder rap, but it would send a message. We're not throwing our boys and girls and women and men in blue under the bus for political points. It'd also boost Chauvin's state appeals. You see, where he's got solid ground. Because let me explain something. Like that heart tumor the jury never heard about. You know, Elon Musk, a guy who's not afraid to buck the system, chimed in on X, saying a pardon's, quote, something to think about. Other people have said that there should be a petition. I think even Ben Shapiro's out there with a petition, arguing that Chauvin was, quote, unjustly convicted. And when big names like that start talking, you know the tide is turning. Now let me explain something too before we forget. And I want you to stop just for a second. All a defendant has to prove is nothing. The defendant has to prove nothing. The prosecution has to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you can bring up evidence that causes the jury to have a doubt, which they can attach a reason to, that is by definition not guilty. Not guilty. If a defendant is not allowed to put on evidence that would provide a reasonable doubt, that is grounds for appeal. If it is proved or alleged or shown that his trial counsel refused or failed to put on adequate evidence or to avail themselves of any and all available defenses, that is ineffective assistance of counsel, and that is a further either chance or cause for appeal or basis to have this reconsidered. This isn't rocket science. Chauvin does not have to be a great guy, a perfect cop. Cops make mistakes. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this very serious, this laser-focused issue here. Is there reasonable doubt? Yes. And would a pardon make sense at the federal level? Yeah. Now, I'm explaining something. There's also this war on cops from the left. Now, remember something. Listen to what I'm saying. The other night, during the President's State of the Union, when the country sat and watched in tears as a 13-year-old with brain cancer in a policeman's uniform was hoisted up, held aloft by his proud father with his uniform, and he received the Secret Service badge. And the Democrats, the same people who applauded this man, the same people who knelt, except for Jerry Nadler, because if he gets down, he ain't getting up. There they were wearing their kente cloth in this mock ceremony of feigned funereal grief, this apotheosis, this elevation, this canonization of George Floyd as some kind of a hero. It made me sick. It made me absolutely sick. There was Nancy Pelosi and others. They knelt down in the Capitol. However, not one of them either stood, clapped, acknowledged any of the American citizens who had been, well, you know the litany. From girls who suffered brain damage because of some trans volleyball player to a 13-year-old boy who survived five Brain surgeries, well, no more than that. In any event, where Rachel Maddow and Nicole Wallace said, oh, this is, I mean, it's a different world now. It is a different world. So keep that in mind. That State of the Union is more important than anything you can imagine. This isn't just about Derek Chauvin. It's about the left's war on law enforcement. Listen carefully. The George Floyd case was one of the biggest tragedies and cons ever. It was their golden ticket to push the systemic racism and police brutality narratives. It was a travesty. They turned a complex tragedy into a battering ram against police and cops and law enforcement everywhere. Minneapolis paid Floyd's family $27 million before the trial even ended. Talk about tipping the scales. Paid him for what? What? There's even reasonable doubt. Well, it will be in a civil matter, but there's doubt. It's a different standard, mind you. But anyway, they were ready to go. And Ben Crump came in. Ben Crump. Oh, my Lord. Ben Crump, he came in there and he was a spokesperson. The riots cost billions, and police morale tanked. Departments across the country are hemorrhaging officers because who'd sign up for this? Remember, I think somebody told me NYPD, well, maybe it's different now, but it was act, don't react. I mean, react rather, don't act. Don't be proactive. If you're a cop, one bad call or one viral video can end your career, your freedom, your life. Who wants to be involved in this? Pardoning Derek Chauvin rights that wrong. And remember, again, it's the federal, not the state. It tells our police, we've got your back. It tells the mob, you don't get to dictate justice. And it tells the truth. George Floyd's death was a mess, an amalgam of drugs, bad decisions, and a system that failed everyone. Not a cold-blooded killing. The left will scream bloody murder. MSDNC is already whining about disrespect to Floyd's family. But what about the respect for the rule of law? Remember, they showed no care, no concern about the disrespect to young Mr. Daniel. He didn't care about that. Don't you love this hypocrisy? This double standard? What about the respect for the men and women who keep our streets safe? Now, the bigger picture. Look, nobody's saying, again, Derek Chauvin's a saint. I don't know where that comes from. Kneeling on a guy's neck for 9 minutes isn't a good look because you know and I know that optics matter. But murder? It's beyond a stretch. It's absurd. The evidence, fentanyl, heart disease, no neck trauma, points to overdose, not homicide. The trial was a pressure cooker, not a courtroom. And the fallout, it's crippled law enforcement while letting drug dealers and criminals run wild. Minneapolis is a war zone now. Crimes through the roof and cops are scared to act, and that's the real legacy of this case. A pardon isn't just about Chauvin. It's about fixing or trying to fix a broken system that punishes the good guys and lets the real threats slide. President Trump's got the guts to do it, and I know he'll do the right thing. He's not afraid of the woke backlash. Minnesota's AG Keith Ellison can cry all he wants about disrespect, but he's the one who pushed this sham prosecution. You see, the facts are on Chauvin's side. And it's time that we listened. Free Derek Chauvin. Not because he's perfect, but because he's not a killer. And because our cops deserve a fighting chance. And it's that simple. And this is one of those cases that when I see that George Floyd to this day, and I'm thinking, this was our hero? We went through all of that for him? It makes me sick. Like you can't believe. Let's take a bit of an interruption and consider this very important word. Listen up, patriots. Just because Donald Trump is back doesn't mean the chaos is over. The world is on edge. Listen carefully. Weather disasters, supply chain failures, labor strikes, economic sabotage. And let's not forget, the radical left is in full meltdown mode. They're not used to losing, and desperate people do desperate things. Capiche? So listen carefully. What happens when the food trucks stop rolling, when grocery store shelves go empty, when power outages leave you in the dark with nothing? You must act now. Prepare. Go to preparewithlionel.com and save $100 on the 3-month emergency food supply. Delicious, nutrient-packed meals that last 25 years. This is not an MRE. This is the world's premier survival food, except no substitutes. If you don't prepare now, you'll regret it. Once disaster strikes, the FEMA lines will be miles long. Will you be standing in them, or will you be safe, ready, and in control? Time is running out. Supplies are vanishing fast. So go to preparewithlionel.com now before it's too late. My friend, this is common sense, plain and simple. This is nothing about being a conservative. And let me also say the other officers involved must likewise be pardoned, or whatever happens, certainly because they were involved even less than Officer Chauvin. Even less. We were absolutely railroaded by these thugs, criminals. Remember these people. Remember the Black Lives Matter. Remember the Antifa people. What was this about? This was insanity. We allowed this to happen. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand. I think we sort of lost our mind. Not sort of. I think we actually did lose our mind. M.R.O. Levon says Obama decried the death of George Floyd 10 days before it purportedly happened. I did not know that, but I will investigate that, and I thank you. See, and you could write down your thoughts here. Raul Rodriguez says, a woman said, I can't breathe, then shot the police. Yep. Remember, one kind of obviates the other. One of the examples that you can breathe is being able to say, I can't breathe. Cut Up Chatter says, Pelosi thanked George for dying, and Pilgrim Media said, officers must have independent discretion out there. They are not to be in any way let loose. But I can tell you this, and I can tell you that I, after having been in the position of proudly serving as a prosecutor with my fellow colleagues, unless you see it on a regular basis, you have no idea what happens in the real world. You have no idea what happens to people who themselves are victimized. And you have no idea that the one thing between us and utter and total anarchy is law and order. Emphasis on order, my friends. Emphasis on order. And the push to pardon. This would be, and I'm going to be very candid, anything that shows these people drastically that we mean business is a benefit to us all. Anything. It would behoove us drastically to do everything that we can to make these people as angry as possible while pursuing justice. And nothing would make them more angry than to go back after the fact and, in a post hoc manner, disconnect the fantasy of the myth of Mr. Floyd. MRO says, and the actor who played George Floyd later appeared in public purporting to be the twin brother of George Floyd. What you know about this, sir, my friend, is fascinating. My friend, let me ask you something. The push to pardon Derek Chauvin isn't just about one man. It's about restoring faith in the justice system. And it's about standing up against a politically charged prosecution that reeked of mob rule and bias and media manipulation from the start. You see, there were people in the past during the civil rights movement who said that the prosecutors were always tilted on the side of the racist. And I thought, that makes sense. Byron Della Beckwith, who kept getting off and getting off and getting off. I agree. And it wasn't just because it was about black people who were the victim of police outrage or police overstepping. It was because justice demanded it. The George Floyd case was never about justice. This is what people have to understand. Matthew Dropko says, were there riots just to see if they could get Trump to send National Guard and Army to quell what state governments didn't act on, to be able to impeach Trump for posse comitatus? That's one of the best theories advanced. I don't believe that was it, but if that had been advanced, it would have had all the earmarks of this lunacy. I think you're correct. Bradley Opland says, in Chicago, they chanted, the blood is on your hands. For so many years, they actually believe it. Remember, it's very, very, very simple. Very, very simple to get people to do things, provided it becomes a part of a chant, of a mob movement, the collective movement of these people. That's the part about this. The George Floyd case was never about justice. I'm telling you again, it was about a narrative. It was about a narrative that the mainstream media and radical activists and opportunistic politicians, all of them built into a global frenzy. And it's all a part of that kind of like that USAID mentality. This is, we'll get you the money. I'll bet you that 27 mil is gone. Gone. I know Crump got it. I don't know who actually tried the case. Trump got it. Crump. Interesting. Do the math. And now, right now, with mounting evidence suggesting that Floyd's death, think about this, may not have been caused by Chauvin at all. It's time to take a hard look at what really happened. Pay attention. And why President Trump should correct this gross miscarriage of justice with a full and total and complete pardon. Let me explain something to you. Let me say this again. Let's assume somebody is driving down the road, blind drunk, 0.3 blood alcohol content over the, I mean, in the record books. He runs a stop sign, runs into a car, car's on fire, there's an old lady in there, dead. They put this guy on trial for vehicular manslaughter and everything you can imagine, second-degree murder. And later on, somebody is able to testify and to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this old lady died seconds before the accident. That assume she was killed. So she died because of a heart attack or some other. Before the accident, she was there, and the reason why she was dead. Let's assume, how you would do this, I don't know, but assume arguendo for the sake of argument, as opposed to innuendo, which is an Italian suppository. But imagine that. It doesn't matter what he did. It doesn't matter if he ran it 3 times, if he got out and shot her with a gun. That would be desecration of a corpse or something. But no, his actions had to cause the death. And if there is reasonable doubt, if you can say, I don't know, I don't believe you proved it beyond, there is that doubt, that's not guilty. That's how it works. You don't have to prove or disprove anything. And you've got to be able to tell that jury. The only way, ladies and gentlemen, you can find this officer guilty is if you can say there is no reasonable way, no possibility that George Floyd died from any other situation other than Officer Chauvin's actions, period. Can you say that? Can you say that you have no doubt? Now, the case against Chauvin, as you know, was rigged from the start. From day one, it was clear they were going to get Chauvin. I like these Chauvin, like chauvinism. You know that interesting phrase. He was never going to get a free trial, a fair trial, or a free trial for that. The media had already convicted him before a single piece of evidence was presented. And I, as in the case of O.J. Simpson, would have spent every bit of focus on the pathology. Why would I want to do that? Why is that important? Simple. I'm going to give the people the reason to go back into their community and to be able to say, oh, no, you found him not guilty. Oh, yeah, the evidence, why? Well, because it was a reason, and it was because of the pathology. Oh, I didn't know that. This way you can absolve your decision. You always have to think about what is that decision? What are they going to do? If you're trying to find John Gotti guilty, and those people have to go back into their community, and they have to go back into Staten Island or wherever it is and explain why they were a part of a jury that found John Gotti guilty, you've got to give them a reason why. So they can say, well, the reason why was this. It was the eyewitness. Oh, I didn't know that. It absolves them. They love it. Let me give you a hook to hang your hat on. Let me give you a hook to hang the not guilty hat on. Let me show you how this is done. It's that simple. I will show you everything you need. And you can explain this to your friends and everybody else. It's simple. I can't tell you if he killed. If he died from something else, if somebody, God forbid, had intervened and shot him, if there's proof that he was already dead, it's not murder. It's not second-degree murder. It's not manslaughter. You have to do it. You have to be responsible. It's the simplest thing in ever. But the entire country was on edge. Remember the violence? Remember that? Remember the riots erupting across cities and businesses burned to the ground? We had plywood sales. Officer, is it Dorr? Officer, no, what was his name? The officer who was not Dorr. What was his name? Officer Dorr? Dorn, yes. Remember him? Remember the black officer? Nobody cares. Remember how Antifa came in? Remember the white buses? Remember the way they were given there were the New York City PD Intel had all of these little PDF files about where to go, how to arrange, how to have frozen bottles of water, cans of soup, how, interestingly enough, miraculously, pallets of bricks were left at corners. And there was evidence of people driving through areas to get a scope of surveillance and getaways. And it was so organized. They were ready for this. And let me tell you something. Maybe, I'm not sure now with Trump, but they're ready to go again. They knew they picked up the phone and say, Project Alpha Dog or whatever it was, let's go, let's do it. They had everybody lined up. Everybody. And just like that. And there are people right now who are working, living, and doing their jobs and whatever. If I said to them, how would you like to be a part of a riot? They say, oh, absolutely. And they look like rational people. They're ready to go. Some of them lawyers, some of them, you don't even know who these people are. You don't know who they are. They're thugs. They're brown shirts. They're the scariest people you've ever seen. Remember, offices, businesses, buildings burned to the ground. Police officers demonized at every turn. And the jurors knew that if they didn't convict Derek Chauvin, they and their families would be at risk. And you know it, and I know it, and we all know it. And let's not forget, okay? Let's not forget that Minneapolis had already settled, I'm going to say this again, a $27 million lawsuit before Floyd's family, before the trial even started. That was a signal to everybody, that there had to be a conviction. They had no intention of letting Chauvin walk free, regardless of the facts. The pressure on the jury was immense. How could they possibly vote to acquit, knowing that the city would explode if they did? How? This wasn't justice. This was a public sacrifice to appease the angry mob, the mob that we got angry. And the death, I'm going to say this again to you, it always comes back. When you are looking at, if there's any kind of scientific evidence, if it's a drug case, it's the drugs. How do you know that's the drug? How do you know that's cocaine? How much did it weigh? Does cocaine act as a humectant? Does it get more? If it's sitting in a humid property room, can it put on weight? I don't know. Does it, I mean, these are, you had a 0.18 blood alcohol. Did you wait the 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the intoximator, the intoxilizer, 200-300? When was the last time this machine was certified? When was the last time it was calibrated? Does the individual who did it, does he have his certification? Did he bring his books with him? I'm not stipulating to any of that. Was he chewing any gum or have anything in his mouth prior to this? What was the blood alcohol at the time of the arrest and the time later on? Did you take 1 or 2 samples? Where are the samples now? May I look at them? May I you don't have them? Is that spoliation? I want to independently test those samples myself. What do you mean you don't have them? I just gave you about 30 different, that's reasonable doubt. It's nothing to do with whether he was drunk, he lifted his leg. That's just DUI. Talk about death, pathology, the cause of death. The lab results, multiple. I can put in, if I have 2 different experts opining as to the cause of death, that's reasonable doubt right there. And depending upon the jury, and depending upon the jurisdiction, many jurisdictions don't allow you to have a liberal voir dire where you get to pick the jury, where you can say, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, is that right, Mrs. Johnson? Mrs. Johnson, welcome. Mrs. Johnson, I represent Mr. Chauvin. And when I'm going to tell Chauvin, and when I point to you, you always stand up. Show complete and total respect for these people. So, Mr. I represent Officer Chauvin. He's on trial today. And Mrs. Johnson, do you know that today is the most important decision you might be making in your life? And that's pretty daunting. Did you know that too, Mrs. Johnson? Did you know that? You know, there are a lot of people who give their opinions about things. There are people who are, there are critics, and maybe they'll go on Yelp and they'll say, what did you think about this? But there is nothing that you will do ever, that is as important as this. This is pretty scary, isn't it? And I'm telling you, when you get to talk to jurors like that, oh my, because they're all listening and they're just, and they also like you. And they're trusting you. And you're saying, I respect you and I need you. And I know you're going to do the right thing. But I haven't even talked about the gays yet. I just talk about them. Mrs. Johnson, let me ask you a question. And we love to say, I remember you're under oath. we're putting you in this situation. This is the scariest place. Look at this. Look at, what is this, like a church? It's Gothic. You're sitting, everybody's listening to you, and I'm asking you, are you going to be fair? What are you going to say? No, I'm not going to be fair. And if you can make them laugh, if I can hear a laugh, if I can hear somebody laugh, I got him. Because you only laugh with people that you like. And the people, the funniest person in the world telling the funniest joke, if you hate them, you're never going to laugh. Laughing is a sign, not of frivolity, but I trust you. I like you. Because you're looking out for me. This is pretty scary, isn't it, Mrs. Johnson? Yes. Well, if you think you're scared, I know one person here who's a little bit more afraid. See? And I'm humanizing him. I had him stand up. Look at him. He's showing me respect. Look at this. I'm pointing to him. And you can either call him Derek or Officer Chauvin. I don't know, because he might have been. You get into that. Now I want to ask you a question, Mrs. Chauvin. Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson. And this is going to be the toughest one. If you were the only, because this has to be unanimous, if you were the only person who says, I don't think they proved the kill, I've got a reasonable doubt about X, Y, or Z. Are you really going to be able, you've seen 12 Angry Men, you know how this works. Come on, we got to go. You're the only holdout. Come on. Do you really have, I mean, I'm sorry to ask you this, but I have to. And I'm sorry to put you in front of, put you on the spot. But by the way, this goes to everybody else. Do you really have the guts to sit down and say, I'm sorry. I'm going to be the lone holdout. And you walk out, and I don't know about, you don't have to tell you, the judge will instruct you. You don't have to tell anybody, but do you have to do that? Or would you say, you know what? Look, if 11 people think so, who am I? Oh, no. I'm going to find if guilty. I respect that, man. But let me tell you something. It's different now. I don't know how long this case is going to be. The judge can't tell you. I don't know. That's something. That's tough. Mrs. Do you understand something too, Mrs. Johnson? And by the way, if you get somebody, she becomes the proxy for everybody else. She becomes the person who represents all the other jurors, all the other ones. They're the ones that you're listening to. Charlie Calais said, don't think Tampon Tim would pardon. No, don't believe so. I know that to be true. Can prosecutors be disbarred for the deceit? Absolutely. If it's rises to the level of misconduct, oh, absolutely. Cut Up Chatter says, the approach we train in the Air Force to work with IG. Indeed. The jury. Now, Mrs. Johnson, let me ask you a question. And I thank you for being here. But I'm asking you a really tough question. You do realize, and they tell you, the defendant does not have to testify. You know that, right? Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, he's not going to testify. I'm telling you right now, I'm telling everybody right here, he is not going to testify because I'm telling him not to. Does that bother you? No. Come on. With all due respect. They always say there's two sides every story, huh? When you want to get up and tell you your side, you bring it right to their attention and you tell them, oh, I'm going to do this. We're not going to testify. No way. But I'm responsible for that. So hold it against me. Ms. Johnson, do you know why I'm going to do that? Let me tell you right now. It's this thing called the Constitution. And there's this thing called the Fifth Amendment that says you have the right to remain silent, but there's this thing called the presumption of innocence. We don't have to prove anything. They brought this case. They have to. They made a commitment. They said, we have the duty and we have the evidence and we're going to hold them to that. Okay, let's see what you have. I'm not going to explain anything. This wasn't our idea. This is his idea. I'm not going to help his case out or do anything. Does that bother you? Anybody here? Mr. Roberts, does that bother you? Come on. Don't you want to say, well, I wish you would have gotten up. And already, what have I done? I've set the tone. My God, they're listening to they like this guy. They know he's going to testify. This guy's got to prove everything. And they're all going to be as proud and as tough as Mrs. Johnson by finding him not guilty or being the holdout. You let the jury know. You tell them exactly what they're going to do. And you give them. Mrs. Johnson, do you realize that if you find someone not guilty, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not because you did something. It's because you, by virtue of your verdict, will be saying there was reasonable doubt. That's all you do. It's like you are a pathologist or a radiologist, and somebody comes to you with a X-ray, and you hold it up, and you say, "That's broken. That's broken up. That's broken." You know those home pregnancy tests? Why you want to find if your home is pregnant, I have no idea. But anyway, but if there's that blue line, there it is. That's it. Pregnant. Broken leg. That's it. When you say not pregnant, what do you mean not pregnant? I'm sorry, just a test. Do you know how long they've been trying? I have no idea. What do you mean she's pregnant? I don't know. I'm just reading the test. You're a juror. You're reading the X-ray. And if the prosecutor finds not guilty, or if there's a reasonable doubt, if you can't, and I'm telling you right now, if you can't, let's just say, hypothetically, if the evidence will show that you can't tell exactly what was the cause of death, that's a not guilty. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything. You're just reading the X-ray. You see what I've done so far? I've already argued the case. They're going to go back. They're going to find him guilty. I'm not guilty right now. I'm provided this. I don't care what anybody says. Believe me when I tell you this. When people sit in there, they forget about the fact that I'm black. This is Minneapolis. And especially later on, they find out, I don't like this prosecutor. I don't like this. I don't like this judge. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't like any of that. And if you can somehow get that jury to like you, oh my God. Oh my God. I had a case one time, it was an armed robbery. And why the judge was, I don't think the judge was paying attention. But I said, Mrs. Fernandez? She was Cuban, from Cuba. I said, do you ever think did the police ever make a mistake? Oh, yes. Come on. Oh, yes. The police, they've got all the training in the world. They've got all the time. They've got laboratories. Make a mistake. They're professionals. Oh, no, sometimes they make a mistake. Because in my country, in Cuba, and she's going into Castro, and I said, okay, that's enough. That's enough. You never know what people are going to say because you come into this and you want them, if they like you. Let me tell you something. Ask anybody who's ever been to jury duty, and they will tell you that is some of the rudest stuff ever. They treat you like cattle. They got this bailiff or this court officer who go, all right, here for the motion control, line up. All right, lunchtime, come back, report back at 12:30. And you sit on these hard benches and it's horrible. It's horrible. And if there's one voice, one person that you see, I like him. One time I wanted to see where the jurors go. I went to the jury room. They had games with pieces missing. They had games. I said, what is this? You can't watch TV. It's horrible. I'll tell you the best story I ever heard. Best one. This isn't here in New York. The jury and the people who've been working the jury, the jury clerk. I mean, they make this thing. God bless the court officers. I don't mean to demean them, but sometimes they can be a bit cattle-like. Anyway, but there was this woman. All of a sudden, this Chinese guy comes in. He must be, I don't know, he looked old. And he had like 20 or 30 Chinese people, like his family, with him. And he takes off his hat and he walks up to the woman and she says, what the hell is this? And none of them, I think the granddaughter can speak English. And she walks up and she said, what did he do? He said, what? They couldn't speak English. They couldn't read. Why they got a summons? I guess he drove a car. I have no idea. They didn't understand. They got this piece of paper in the mail. They knew his name. But the daughter says, what did he do? And they say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're a juror. What? A juror. A juror? What? They all came to support him. They thought the old man was from China. They thought, he screwed up. They're going to put him in jail. He had his hat. He's shaking. What did he do? You know, it's brutal. It's humanity. That's why trial lawyers, all those people, everyone that you see, Coney Barrett, Alito, well, I mean, not him, but a lot of these professors, they've never tried a case in their life. They've never been to traffic court. This is the human element. This is a whole other thing, my friend. So we're going to pick up again on this. This story means a lot to me. This case of Officer Chauvin. So let me ask you something. Thank you, by the way. Cut Up Chatter, I thank you so much. Pilgrim, Brad Upland, Matthew, Dropco, MRO Levon, thank you. Let me see, Raul, thank you so much for your thoughts. By the way, I got a brand new video on. Oh, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this one. What the hell was it? I'm gonna love it if I can remember it. It was a damn good one too, by the way. It was a damn good video. I don't remember what it was about, but it was a damn good one. Oh yes, Gavin Newsom dumps woke left and trans athletes for Trump's winning playbook. Did that one, and also we're going to talk later on about Charlie Kirk, who let me down by appearing. That is really not a good idea, by appearing on Gavin Newsom's podcast. Sorry, don't do anything to give this guy even a smidgen of respectability. You see what I'm saying? Even a smidgen. All right, you friends, don't forget to follow Mrs. L at Lynn's Warriors. Also have our sister station, our sister channel at Lionel Legal. And don't forget to follow us here, always at Lionel Nation. Have a great and glorious day, my friends. Until tomorrow. Until later. Remember this, the monkey's dead. The show's over. Sue you. Da.